The Great Hall of Valanthor stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, its crystalline walls catching light from 3 distant suns and scattering rainbows across the assembled delegates from 1,000 different worlds. Commander Marcus Cole stood at the entrance of this magnificent chamber, wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. And he felt very small. Indeed, the Galactic Summit happened only once every 100 years. And this was the first time humanity had been invited to attend 40 years ago. Humans had discovered faster-than-light travel almost by accident, when a young physicist in Argentina had spilled coffee on her equations and noticed something no one else had ever seen since that day. Humanity had spread across a dozen star systems, built colonies on worlds that should have killed them, and made first contact with 17 different alien species. Most of those species had tried to destroy humanity. None had succeeded, but the Zorath hegemony was different from anything humans had encountered before. They ruled 12,000 star systems with an iron grip that had lasted for 10,000 years. Their emperor was ancient, beyond human understanding, and his 5 daughters were considered the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Marcus had come to this summit with a simple mission: secure trade agreements and perhaps a defensive alliance that would protect Earth from the hostile species that surrounded human space. He had not expected to be laughed at. The laughter started the moment he walked into the Great Hall. It began as whispers and chuckles from the assembled aliens. But when he approached the raised platform where the 5 princesses sat on floating thrones, the mockery became open and cruel. Princess Seraphine was the eldest, heir to the entire hegemony, and her silver skin seemed to glow with contempt as she looked down at the human. Her eyes were pools of liquid gold, and her hair flowed behind her like living mercury. She was beautiful in the way that a supernova is beautiful, terrifying and impossible to look away from. Is this truly the best that Earth could send? She asked, her voice carrying across the great hall with perfect clarity. A soldier playing at diplomacy? The other princesses laughed at their sister's words. Princess Valera was second-born, the warrior of the family, and her muscular frame was covered in ceremonial armor that Marcus knew was not merely decorative. She had led armies against rebel worlds and had never known defeat. She looked at Marcus the way a predator looks at something too small to be worth hunting. Princess Nixara sat with a book hovering before her, ancient knowledge keeper of the royal family, and she barely glanced up from her reading to acknowledge the human's presence. Her skin was deep purple, and strange symbols floated around her head like a crown made of mathematics. When she spoke, her voice was cold and dismissive. Their species has possessed faster-than-light travel for only 40 years, she said. They have contributed nothing to galactic knowledge worth noting. Their ships are held together with hope and primitive welding, added Princess Celestine, the diplomat of the family. Her words were polite, but her tone made them into weapons. One wonders how they survived the journey here at all. Princess Empress was the youngest and was said to be the most beautiful being in the galaxy. She did not speak it all. She simply looked through Marcus as if he did not exist, as if he was not worth the effort of acknowledgement. Marcus stood before them and felt the weight of their scorn pressing down on him like gravity from a dying star behind him. He could hear the other delegates whispering and laughing. Earth's delegation consisted of only 12 people. While some species had brought thousands, they were nothing here. They were less than nothing. But Marcus Cole had not survived the Martian uprising by running from impossible odds. He had not ended the Belt Wars by giving up when things seemed hopeless, and he had not made first contact with the hostile Kreth Consortium by backing down from creatures that wanted to eat him. He waited for the laughter to fade, and then he spoke. Your Highnesses, he said, his voice calm and clear. I thank you for the opportunity to address this summit on behalf of Earth. And the human species? We have not granted you any such opportunity. Princess Seraphine interrupted. You are here as observers. Nothing more, of course. Marcus said. I meant only to express gratitude for being allowed to observe such magnificent proceedings. Something flickered in Seraphine's golden eye. She had expected anger or humiliation. She had not expected patience over the next 3 days. Marcus attended every session of the summit. He listened to trade negotiations between species that had been dealing with each other for millennia. He watched military demonstrations from empires that could destroy Earth with a single fleet. He studied the complex web of alliances and rivalries that held the hegemony together, and everywhere he went, the mockery followed him. Delegates would point and laugh when he walked past. Servants would pretend not to see him when he needed assistance. One evening, a group of young nobles from a minor species cornered him in a corridor and demanded to know how humans had survived first contact with the Kreth when so many other species had been consumed. Marcus told them the truth. Humans had fought back with such desperate ferocity that the Kreth had decided they were more trouble than they were worth. The nobles laughed and called him a liar, but Marcus noticed that Princess Valera had been watching from the shadows. And she did not laugh. She was studying him the way a general studies an enemy before battle. On the third night, Marcus made his way to the great library of Valanthor, where Princess Nixara spent most of her time. The ancient texts of the hegemony were stored here. Billions of documents spanning 10,000 years of history. Most species were not allowed to access these records. But Marcus had found a loophole in the summit protocols that granted all delegates basic research privileges. He searched through the oldest documents he could find, reading about the founding of the hegemony and the laws that governed it. And there, buried in a text so ancient that even the librarians had forgotten it existed, he found what he was looking for. Right of desperate petition. It was a law from before the hegemony, from a time when the galaxy was ruled by competing royal houses that constantly warred with each other. Any species facing extinction could invoke this right and demand a chance to prove their worth through 5 trials. If they succeeded, they could claim a single boon from the ruling power that could not be refused. Marcus read the law 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. Then he smiled. Earth was dying slowly. The Kreth had claimed the asteroid belt. The Mandori were blockading Jupiter's moons. Within 50 years, humanity would be strangled by enemies on all sides. This qualified as existential threat, and the law was still valid. It had never been removed from the hegemony's founding documents. Princess Seraphine and her sisters had laughed at humanity. They had dismissed Earth as primitive and worthless. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. Marcus closed the ancient text and began planning for what came next. The mockery would end soon enough, and the 5 princesses of the Zorith dynasty were about to learn why humanity had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. The Trial of Ascension was the most important ceremony of the Galactic Summit, and every species that wished to improve their standing in the hegemony could send a champion to compete. Marcus had spent the night before studying the rules and requirements. The trial demanded that any champion be of royal blood or formally adopted into a noble house. Humans had neither royalty nor noble houses in any form that the hegemony would recognize, but Marcus had found another way when the great hall filled with delegates. On the morning of the 4th day, the 5 princesses took their places on their floating thrones with the confidence of beings who had never known true challenge. Emperor Zorthix sat above them all on a throne carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight. He was ancient beyond measure, his silver skin weathered by 10,000 years of rule, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who had outlived every enemy. Marcus walked to the center of the hall and stood in the circle of judgment where champions made their petitions. The whispers started. Immediately, what was the human doing? Had he lost his mind? Did he not understand that he could not participate in the trial? Princess Seraphine leaned forward on her throne, amusement dancing in her golden eyes. Has the human come to entertain us with another display of primitive ambition? Marcus ignored her and addressed the emperor directly. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, his voice carrying across the hall with surprising strength. "I come before you to invoke the right of desperate petition on behalf of Earth and the human species." The hall went silent. Even the princesses stopped smiling. Emperor Zorth's ancient eyes focused on Marcus with sudden intensity. And for the first time since arriving at the summit, Marcus felt like he was being truly seen. "You know what you invoke, human?" the emperor asked, his voice soft but somehow reaching every corner of the vast chamber. "I do, Your Majesty. The right of desperate petition has not been invoked in 6,000 years, Nixara said from her throne, her book forgotten in her lap. The last species to attempt it was destroyed in the first trial. And the species before that, Valera added with a predatory smile, was hunted to extinction when they failed the fourth. Failure means death, Princess Celestine stated coldly. Not just for you, human, but for your entire delegation. I understand the consequences, Marcus said. Princess Empress finally looked at him directly for the first time since his arrival. Her impossibly beautiful face, showing something that might have been curiosity. Emperor Zorth rose from his throne, and the movement sent ripples of power through the hall that made lesser beings drop to their knees. Marcus remained standing, though every instinct screamed at him to bow. Explain to this court why you believe your species qualifies for the right of desperate petition. The emperor commanded. Marcus had prepared for this question. The Kreth Consortium has claimed Earth asteroid belt, cutting off vital resources that humanity needs to survive. He began. The Mindori have established a blockade around Jupiter's moons, preventing expansion that our growing population requires. He paused to let the words sink in. 7 other hostile species have claimed territory surrounding human space, and our military cannot match their combined strength. This is not our concern, Sarafini interrupted. Many species face such pressures and survive through adaptation or surrender. We will not surrender, Marcus said simply. An adaptation requires time that we do not have. Then you will die like countless species before you, Valera said. That is the way of the galaxy. Perhaps, Marcus acknowledged, but the founding laws of the hegemony state that any species facing existential threat may invoke the right of desperate petition and prove their worth through 5 trials. He looked up at the emperor. I ask only for the chance to prove that humanity deserves to survive. The great hall buzzed with whispered conversations as delegates debated what they were witnessing. No one had expected the primitive humans to know about such ancient laws. No one had imagined they would have the courage to invoke them. Emperor Zorth descended from his throne, his robes flowing behind him like liquid shadow, and he walked toward Marcus until they stood face to face. The emperor was tall, nearly 8 feet, and Marcus had to crane his neck to meet his eyes. The right of desperate petition grants you the chance to face 5 trials, the emperor said, but these trials are designed by those who stand to lose most from your success. He gestured toward his daughters. My 5 daughters will each design 1 trial for you to complete. Marcus looked at the princesses. Seraphinis' contempt had been replaced by cold fury. Valera was grinning like a wolf who had just spotted wounded prey. Nixara was already calculating, her brilliant mind designing challenges that no human could possibly overcome. Celestine's diplomatic mask had cracked to reveal the Ruthlessness beneath an embrace was watching Marcus with an expression. He could not read. "If you complete all 5 trials," the Emperor continued, "you may claim a single boon from me that I cannot refuse, bound by blood oath and the ancient laws of our people. And if I fail, then you and your delegation die, and Earth loses its only representative at this summit." The Emperor leaned closer, and Marcus could feel the weight of ages pressing down on him. "You are clever, human, to find this law buried in our oldest records. But cleverness will not save you from what my daughters will devise." Marcus met the ancient being's gaze without flinching. "Humanity has never been saved by cleverness alone. Your Majesty, we survive because we refuse to accept that survival is impossible." Something shifted in the Emperor's expression. It was not quite respect, but it was no longer dismissal. "Very well," he said, turning back to face the assembled court. "Let it be witnessed by all present. The human commander Marcus Cole has invoked the right of desperate petition on behalf of his species. He will face 5 trials designed by the 5 princesses of the Zorth dynasty, the Emperors." Voice rose to fill every corner of the great hall. "Success will grant him a single boon that I am bound by blood oath to fulfill. Failure will mean death for him and his delegation." He looked at his daughters, and Marcus saw something in his eyes that surprised him. It was not concern. For the human challenger, it was curiosity about how his daughters would respond to a test of their own. "You have 1 week to design your trials," the Emperor told the princesses. "Make them worthy of the Zorth dynasty." Princess Seraphine rose from her throne, her silver skin blazing with barely contained rage. "You will regret this, human," she said. "I will design a trial that no being in the galaxy could survive. Then I look forward to proving you wrong." Marcus replied. The other princesses said nothing, but their eyes promised horrors that Marcus could only imagine. Had known this would happen, he had known they would try to destroy him, but he had also spent 40 years watching humanity survive threats that should have ended them. 100 times over, the princesses saw a primitive species barely out of its cradle. They did not see what Marcus saw. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or military might. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to die. The 5 trials would begin soon, and the daughters of the Zorth dynasty were about to discover why underestimating humans was the most dangerous mistake in the galaxy. Princess Valera designed the first trial, and she made no attempt to hide her intentions. She wanted Marcus dead, and she wanted the galaxy to watch him die. The arena pits of Volanther had hosted combat for thousands of years, and the creature that waited for Marcus in the sand was legendary. The Thornback Leviathan stood 40 feet tall, covered in armor plates that could deflect starship weapons, and its 6 arms ended in claws that could tear through titanium like paper. No one had ever survived single combat against a Thornback. Valera expected the human to last perhaps 30 seconds. Marcus lasted 6 hours. He did not try to overpower the creature, because he knew that was impossible. Instead, he used the only advantages humans had ever possessed: endurance and intelligence. He ran and dodged and rolled through the sand, letting the Leviathan exhaust itself, trying to catch him when the creature charged. He moved aside at the last moment and let it crash into the arena walls when it swung its massive claws. He was already somewhere else, hour after hour. The pattern continued. The Leviathan grew slower and more frustrated, while Marcus conserved his energy and waited for his opportunity. The crowd that had gathered to watch a quick execution grew restless, then amazed, then utterly silent as they witnessed something impossible. A human was outlasting a Thornback Leviathan in the 6th hour. The creature stumbled, and Marcus struck. He had studied Thornback anatomy during his week of preparation, and he knew that behind the 3rd armor plate on the creature's left side was its Secondary hard, his blade found the gap between the plates, and the Leviathan Felvalira sat frozen on her viewing platform, unable to believe what she had witnessed. The primitive human had not beaten her creature through strength or advanced weapons. He had beaten it by refusing to die long enough for it to make a mistake. Princess Nixara designed the second trial, and she was certain that raw intelligence would succeed where physical challenge had failed. The paradox of endless stars was a mathematical problem that had consumed the greatest minds in the galaxy for millennia. It involved calculating the precise gravitational interactions between 17 stellar bodies in a way that predicted their movements for 1 billion years. No individual mind could hold all the variables at once. It was considered unsolvable. Marcus asked for only one thing before the trial began: access to a quantum communication link with Earth. Nixara laughed and granted his request, assuming he wanted to say goodbye to his species instead. Marcus connected to every physicist, mathematician, and computer scientist that Earth possessed for 72 hours. Humanity worked together across 12 star systems, sharing calculations and checking each other's work. They broke the problem into pieces that individual minds could handle and then assembled those pieces into a complete solution. When Marcus presented his answer, Nixara's hands trembled as she verified each step. The solution was not elegant. It was not the work of a single brilliant mind, but it was correct. "You did not solve this alone," Nixara said, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Marcus agreed. "I am not intelligent enough to solve it alone. And I knew that from the beginning. But humans together can accomplish what no single human can achieve." Princess Celestine designed the third trial with the confidence of someone who had never failed it. Diplomacy, the Vorthan and the Krell had been at war for 10,000 years, and every mediator the hegemony had sent had failed to bring peace. Both species had rejected Celestine's own proposals 12 times. She gave Marcus 3 months to succeed where the entire diplomatic corps of the hegemony had failed. Marcus did not approach either species as a diplomat. He approached them as a listener. He lived among the Vorthan for 6 weeks, learning their language and their customs and the names of everyone they had lost in the endless war. Then he did the same with the Krell. He did not try to convince either side that they were wrong. He did not propose compromises or demand concessions. Instead, he learned what each species truly wanted: not victory, but an end to the grief that had consumed them for millennia. The treaty Marcus proposed was unlike anything Celestine had ever seen. He did not divide territory or establish boundaries. He proposed a shared monument, a massive structure built by both species together, where every name of every being lost in 10,000 years of war would be carved in stone that would last until the stars burned out. Both species agreed within hours. When Celestine demanded to know how he had accomplished what the hegemony could not, Marcus gave her a simple answer: "I listened to what they actually wanted instead of telling them what they should want." Princess Empress designed the fourth trial as an act of cruel amusement. Lithori were a silicon-based species that had no emotions, no art, no music, and no understanding of beauty. They had never been moved by anything in their 3 billion-year existence. Empress demanded that Marcus create a work of art so beautiful that it would make the Lithori weep. She expected him to fail because she believed humans were incapable of creating true beauty. Marcus brought artists from every nation on Earth, musicians and painters and poets and dancers and sculptors, worked together for weeks, combining their talents into something that no single artist could have created. The final piece was a symphony of light and sound and movement that told the story of humanity's journey from darkness to stars. It showed the first humans looking up at the night sky and wondering what the lights meant. It showed the first rockets rising through Earth's atmosphere like dreams, given physical form. It showed humanity reaching out to touch the void and refusing to be alone. The Lithori watched in perfect stillness for 3 hours. When the symphony ended, they did not weep because they had no eyes and no tears. They did something that shocked the entire galaxy. They knelt in their 3 billion-year existence. The Lithori had never shown reverence to any species or any creation, but they knelt before the work of human hands and human hearts. Empress could not speak for a very long time after the Princess Seraphine designed the final trial, and she was determined to succeed where her sisters had failed. Deathworld, Korra, was the most hostile planet in the hegemony's territory. Its atmosphere was toxic, its wildlife was lethal, and its weather could kill in seconds even. Hegemony soldiers equipped with the best technology rarely survived more than a few hours on its surface. Seraphine sent Marcus to Korra with only basic survival equipment and told him to survive for 1 week. She was certain she would collect his corpse on the 6th day. Marcus walked out of the wilderness carrying samples of 3 species that no one had ever documented before. He had also befriended a pack of apex predators by sharing his food with them during a storm. When Seraphine demanded to know how he had survived, Marcus told her the truth. Humans evolved on a death world, he said. Earth tried to kill us with ice ages and plagues and predators and each other. We survived because we learned to adapt to anything. We are persistence predators. Your Highness, we do not win by being the strongest or the fastest. We win by refusing to stop until our enemies are too tired to fight anymore. Seraphine looked at the human standing before her, battered and bloody but unbroken, and something changed in her golden eyes. For the first time since she had learned to speak, she had no words. The 5 trials were complete, and the 5 princesses of the Zorath dynasty were about to learn what their mockery had truly cost them. The wedding ceremonies took place across 5 different worlds over the span of 6 months, each ceremony following the traditions of each princess's maternal lineage. Marcus honored every ritual without complaint, learned every custom without being asked. He showed each princess the same patient respect that he had shown the thornback Leviathan in the arena, waiting for the right moment, never forcing, always enduring. The princesses did not make things easy for him. Seraphine refused to speak to him for the first 3 months. Valera challenged him to combat every day, expecting him to refuse and prove his weakness. Nixera buried herself in her libraries and pretended he did not exist. Celestine treated him with icy politeness that somehow felt worse than open hostility, and Empress simply watched, always watching, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle that made no sense to her. But Marcus had not survived the trials by giving up when things became difficult, and he did not intend to give up now. The first crack in their resistance came from Valera. After 50 consecutive days of Marcus accepting her combat challenges and losing gracefully without complaint, she finally demanded an explanation. Why do you keep fighting when you know you cannot win against me? Marcus wiped blood from his lip and smiled. Because fighting is not always about winning, he said. Sometimes it is about showing that you are willing to try, that you respect your opponent enough to give them your best effort, even when defeat is certain. Valera stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since the binding, she offered him her hand to help him stand. It was a small gesture, but it was a beginning. Nexara was next. Marcus found her in the archives late one night, surrounded by ancient texts and looking more exhausted than he had ever seen her. She had been searching for a legal way to break the binding for months and had found nothing. You knew, didn't you? She asked when she noticed him watching from the doorway. You knew there was no loophole before you ever invoked the law. I studied your legal system for 2 years before coming to this summit. Marcus admitted. I read every relevant text I could find, but I did not invoke the binding because there was no escape. Then why did you do it? Marcus walked into the library and sat across from her. Because Earth needed more than a trade agreement or a military alliance. Those things can be broken when they become inconvenient. But family cannot be abandoned so easily. Nexera's purple skin flushed with something that might have been embarrassment. You think binding yourself to 5 unwilling brides is family? Not yet, Marcus said. But I am hoping that with enough time, it might become something real. He stood to leave. I noticed that you solved the temporal mechanics section of the paradox of endless stars differently than my team did. He added, your approach was more elegant. Would you be willing to show me how you did it? Nexera's eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever asked her to teach them before. Everyone assumed that her knowledge was beyond their understanding. You want me to teach you mathematics? I want to learn from someone brilliant enough to make my entire species look like children. Marcus said, if you are willing. The lessons began the next day. Celestine was harder to reach. She was the diplomat, trained from birth to hide her true feelings behind perfect masks. And Marcus could not find a crack in her defenses until the day he witnessed her fail. A mere territorial dispute between 2 species had turned violent. And Celestine's proposed compromise had been rejected by both sides. She sat alone in her chambers afterward, and Marcus saw something he had never expected to see. Tears. He entered without asking permission and sat beside her. They killed each other. Celestine whispered, thousands dead because I could not find the right words. Marcus said nothing. He simply sat with her in her grief and let her know that she was not alone when she finally looked at him. Her diplomatic mask was gone. How did you broker peace between the Vorthan and the Crow when everyone else had failed? I listened, Marcus said. I learned what they actually wanted instead of assuming. I already knew, and when I finally understood their grief, the solution became obvious. Will you teach me? If you will teach me how you maintain your composure when everything is falling apart. Marcus replied, I could use that skill. Celestine almost smiled. I suppose we both have things to learn. Empress remained the most mysterious. She rarely spoke to Marcus, but he noticed that she was always watching, always studying, always trying to understand. One evening, he found her in the garden where humans had performed their symphony for the Litherish, was standing in the exact spot where the art had been displayed. Her impossibly beautiful face showing an emotion he could not identify. Why did you do it? She asked without turning around. The symphony. I mean, not just for the trial. You put something real into that piece of art. Something that had nothing to do with winning. Marcus stood beside her and looked up at the stars. Humans have always believed that beauty is worth creating even when no one will see it. He said, we paint pictures and write songs and tell stories because something in us needs to make meaning out of existence. The symphony was not just for the trial. It was a gift from humanity to the galaxy, a way of saying that we are here, and we matter, and we can create things worthy of the universe that made us. Empress turned to look at him, and for the first time, he saw past her perfect beauty to the person underneath. You are not what I expected, she said softly. What did you expect? A primitive barbarian trying to steal power through clever manipulation of our laws. Marcus laughed. I am definitely guilty of clever manipulation, but I did not come here to steal anything. I came here to save my species, and I stayed because I realized that your species needs saving too. Empress's eyes widened. What do you mean? Your father is ancient, Marcus said. One day he will die, and when he does, your empire will tear itself apart. Every powerful house is already positioning themselves for civil war. Your sisters know this, even if they do not speak of it. He looked at her with steady eyes. I did not bind myself to the 5 of you to claim power for humanity. I did it because I believe that together, We might be able to prevent the disaster that is coming. Empress was silent for a long time. And if we cannot prevent it, then we will survive it together. Marcus said, that is what humans do. We face impossible situations and we find a way through. Not because we are the strongest or the smartest, but because we refuse to accept that there is no hope. Seraphine found them in the garden an hour later. She had finally come to speak with Marcus after months of silence. And the words she had prepared died in her throat. When she saw her youngest sister actually talking with their human husband, "You have been busy," Seraphine said coldly. "I have been patient," Marcus corrected. "There is a difference." The eldest princess approached until she stood face to face with the human who had appended her entire existence. "You have chained yourself to an empire that may tear itself apart," she said. "You have married 5 women who despise you. You have made yourself the most visible target in 12,000 systems. Why?" Marcus looked at her without flinching. "Because in 40 years, humanity went from our first moon landing to touching the edge of the galaxy. Because we survived ice ages and plagues and ourselves. Because when the universe throws something at humanity, we catch it and throw it back harder." He paused. "Your empire is going to burn, Seraphine. The only question is who rebuilds it. And you think that will be you? I think it will be us. All of us. If you are willing to stop laughing long enough to listen." Seraphine studied the impossible human who had turned her family's mockery into his greatest weapon. She had spent months hating him, planning against him, searching for ways to destroy him, but standing here in the starlight, she finally understood something that she had been too proud to see. He was not her enemy. He never had been. Humanity, she said finally, is going to be a problem. Marcus smiled the same smile he had worn in the arena. Bloody and battered, but unbroken. You have no idea, in the decades that followed, historians would mark the Galactic Summit as the moment when everything changed. The 5 princesses who had laughed at Earth learned to fight beside their human husband through civil war, invasion, and revolution. Each of them was transformed by his quiet persistence into something stronger than they had been alone. Their children would inherit an empire rebuilt on foundations of unity rather than fear, and the galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and worthless would learn a lesson that it would never forget. Never underestimate a species that refused to know when it was beaten. The mockery had ended and humanity's story was only beginning. The throne room of Emperor Zorath Ix was the most magnificent chamber in the known galaxy. And on this day, it was filled with representatives from 10,000 worlds who had come to witness history. No one had completed the 5 trials in 6,000 years. No one from a primitive species had ever even attempted them. And yet here stood Marcus Cole, a human from a species that had possessed faster than light travel for only 40 years, waiting to claim his boon from the most powerful being in the galaxy. The 5 princesses stood behind their father's throne, arranged in order of age as tradition demanded. None of them laughed. Now none of them whispered mockery to each other. They watched Marcus with expressions that ranged from cold fury to something that might have been reluctant respect. Emperor Zorath studied the human for a long moment before speaking. "You have accomplished what none believed possible," the Emperor said, his ancient voice carrying across the throne room. "You have completed trials designed to destroy you by 5 of the most powerful beings in my empire. You have earned your boon. Human, name what you wish, and if it is within my power, I am bound by blood oath to grant it." Marcus had spent months preparing for this moment. Earth needed protection from the hostile species that surrounded human space. A defensive alliance with the hegemony would guarantee Earth's survival for generations. Trade agreements would bring technology and resources that humanity desperately needed. Military support would end the threat of the Kreth and Mindori forever any of these boons would save his species, but Marcus had seen something during his trials that changed everything. The hegemony was not the eternal empire it appeared to be, was rotting from within, held together by tradition and fear rather than genuine unity. The emperor was ancient, and his daughters were unprepared for what would come when he finally passed. Civil war was brewing beneath the surface. And when it came, whoever won would turn their attention to vulnerable species like humanity. Earth did not just need protection, Earth needed power. Marcus took a deep breath and spoke words that would change the course of galactic history. Invoke the binding of ascension. He said. The throne room erupted. Delegates shouted in confusion, and outraged advisors to the emperor rushed forward as if they could somehow stop what was happening. The 5 princesses stood frozen in shock. Emperor Zorath raised his hand, and silence fell across the chamber like a physical force. Repeat what you have said, human, the emperor commanded, and for the first time, Marcus heard something like genuine emotion in his ancient voice. I invoke the binding of ascension, Marcus said again, louder this time, under the ancient laws that predate the hegemony itself. Princess Nixara was the first to find her voice. The binding of ascension has not been invoked in 6,000 years, she said, and her voice shook with an emotion Marcus had never heard from her before. It cannot possibly still be valid. The law was never removed from the founding documents of the hegemony. Marcus replied, I checked. This is madness, Princess Seraphine shouted, stepping forward from her place behind the throne. You cannot truly believe that we would honor such an archaic. The law is clear, Marcus interrupted, and the act of interrupting a princess of the Zorath dynasty sent another wave of shock through the assembled delegates. A champion who completes trials designed by members of a royal house may claim marriage rights to those who designed the trials. It was created to prevent royal families from using impossible challenges to reject worthy suitors. He looked at each of the princesses in turn, completed 5 trials designed by 5 princesses. The binding applies to all 5 of you. Valera's hand went to the ceremonial blade at her side, and for a moment Marcus thought she might attack him in front of the entire court. Celestine's diplomatic composure had shattered completely. Leaving behind naked Farimbris looked at Marcus as if she was truly seeing him for the first time, and Seraphine turned to her father with desperation in her golden eyes. Father, surely you will not allow this. Surely you will not bind us to this primitive creature from a species that barely knows how to build starships. Emperor Zorath sat in perfect stillness for a very long time. The throne room held its breath. Then, slowly, the ancient ruler began to laugh. It was not the cruel laughter that the princesses had directed at Marcus when he first arrived. It was something deeper. Something that held genuine amusement and perhaps even admiration. You have studied our laws more carefully than my own advisors, the emperor said when his laughter faded. You have outmaneuvered my daughters, my court, and perhaps even me. He rose from his throne, and the movement sent waves of power rippling through the chamber. When you first came to this summit, my daughters laughed at your species. They dismissed humanity as primitive and worthless. They designed trials meant to humiliate you before destroying you. The emperor walked toward Marcus until they stood face to face, and you used their own contempt against them. You found a law they did not know existed and turned their weapons into your victory. He placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder, and the weight of ages pressed down on the human. You are exactly what humanity needed to send to this summit. Not a diplomat who would beg for scraps, not a general who would threaten war, but a warrior who understood that the greatest battles are won before the first blow is ever struck. The emperor turned to face his daughters. By ancient law and imperial decree, Commander Marcus Cole of Earth is hereby bound in marriage covenant to the 5 princesses of the Zorth dynasty. He shall be elevated to Prince Consort of the Hegemony, with all rights, privileges, and protections thereof. The princesses stood frozen in horror as their father's words washed over them. "Father," Seraphim began, "the law is clear," the Emperor said, and his voice left no room for argument. "You designed the trials. He completed them. The binding applies." He looked at each of his daughters in turn. "Perhaps this will teach you not to underestimate species that you consider beneath. You," the Emperor turned back to Marcus, "you have played a dangerous game. Human, my daughters will not accept this easily. The court will plot against you, and half the hegemony will consider you an insult to everything they believe in." "I know," Marcus said. "I did not come here expecting an easy path." "No," the Emperor agreed. "Imagine you did not." He stepped back and addressed the assembled court. "Let it be recorded in the annals of the hegemony. Earth is no longer a vain way, primitive species to be dismissed and ignored. They are family now, and anyone who threatens them threatens the Zorth dynasty itself." Marcus looked at the 5 princesses who were now bound to him by ancient law. Serafini's golden eyes burned with fury that promised retribution. Valara looked like she was calculating exactly how many ways she could kill him without violating the binding. Nixer's brilliant mind was already searching for loopholes that might free them. Celestine's diplomatic mask had returned, but beneath it, Marcus could see something dangerous growing. An Empress watched him with an expression that he could not read at all. He had won, but he knew that the real battle was only beginning. The mockery had ended, but the war for the future of humanity and the hegemony was about to start, and Marcus Cole intended to win that war the same way he had won everything else, by outlasting everyone who underestimated what humans could accomplish.